everybody, welcome to the Darcey Bra seam pattern tutorial for style 3. In this video I'll be going through sewing all your seams. Once all the seams are sewn on this style, it is then exactly the same method of applying all the elastics and everything as it is for style 1. So if you're watching this video in the style 3 playlist, then the next video that plays will show you how to apply your elastics, and that will be on the style 1 version, but it's exactly the same for this style. So I've got my pattern pieces cut out. We've got one stretch mesh centre front pattern piece here, and then I've got 4 of each pattern piece, so the 3 other pattern pieces. So I've got 2 in the main fabric for each pattern piece, and then 2 lining. So for the main fabric I'm using the cotton spandex jersey which I bought on Spoonflower, and for the lining I'll be using a stretch mesh. The pattern does call for a stretch mesh front, that's a bit of a mouthful, but you can use lace if you want, or just a contrast fabric. So cut out all your pattern pieces like this and get all your other supplies at the ready. Obviously the full list of the supplies is included with the pattern, so check you've got everything and let's get sewing. Start with your upper centre front and your lower centre front main and lining. Now what we're going to do is basically sandwich this pattern piece in between the 2 right sides of the main and lining along this edge. So if you take your lower centre front main and just match that sort of bottom edge. It's 2 opposite curves, so it's going to need a little bit of work to ease in. Flip this all over like that, and then take the right side of your lining and place it down on top of this like that, and then just pin this in place at that end. Then take the other end and pin this in place again like that. Very fiddly. There we go. There is notches on this seam on both pattern pieces, so do match the notches then for this next bit here, but just sort of ease these curves together and pin along the curve. So there we are, just make sure that it's all lying nice and flat where you're going to sew. So sew this seam here with a 1 cm seam allowance and a straight stitch. So my machine is set to a straight stitch, and as I sew, I'm going to make sure everything's nice and flat so we don't get any tucks in this sort of upper centre front here. Yeah, so moment of truth. If we just double check there's no tucks in here before we trim back or grade the seam allowance. So yeah, looking good. Happy with that. So now obviously if we just turn this through, it's going to be a little bit bulky because of the width of the seam allowance and just all the layers. So I'm going to grade this seam allowance. I do like to include a centimetre seam allowance on my bra patterns. I just think it makes it easier to grade the seams. Also, if you're working with delicate fabrics, then it makes it easier just to sew them with a little bit more of a seam allowance. So I'm grading this seam allowance right here, and the stretch mesh layers I am just cutting to the same layer. They're quite thin layers, so that's not a big problem. And then the fabric layer, I'm just going to cut just that little bit longer. So the overall seam now is probably about 5 mil or like 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to cut this all back like that. And there you go. So that's just going to reduce the bulk of the seam. So also because this is a curve seam and it's quite a sort of steep curve, what I'm going to do is just put a couple of notches, or maybe 3 notches around this curve. So I'm going to put one there. So that's what it sort of will look like. And then another one about there. And then just one more around here. So now if I just fold this sort of through so the wrong sides of the main and lining are together, we have a beautifully flat seam like that. So I'm just going to give this a press. This is purely a style line, so you can press this flat. It's not meant to create any shape at the bust or anything like that, so I'm just going to give that a quick press. Do take care if you are using stretch mesh, put your iron on a really low heat and do test press this first on a scrap piece of fabric. Okay, if you are using a thicker fabric, maybe a scuba for your main fabric, you might just want to top stitch this in place just close to this curved edge on top of the fabric. But I'm using a cotton spandex jersey and I've never really felt the need to add any top stitching or anything like that, but if you do want to add that for maybe a style feature or because your fabric's a little bit thicker and you want to keep all the seams in place, then do just add in some top stitching along this seam here. Then just do exactly the same for the other side. So that's the centre front pattern piece all done. Next up is the side front. So again, we're going to trap all our seam allowances inside between the main fabric and lining. So to do this, I'm just going to place the side front main to the right side of the centre front. Flip this all over, and if your lining has a right side, take the right side and place it towards the inside of the bra, and just pin all these layers in place. I'm going to do it at the top and the bottom, and then work out in between. Now these two curves are going in the same direction, so this is quite an easy seam to fit together, despite it being a curve. It just is a little bit fiddly with all the stretch mesh layers. Again, there is notches on this pattern, so do use those to help you. So sew this seam with a 1 cm seam allowance, again using a straight stitch. So like we did before, grade your seam allowance. Gets a little bit tricky with all the different layers. But if you cut your first lining layer the shortest, and because you're using stretch mesh, if you are using stretch mesh like I am, then you will be able to see these seams, so if you cut them as neat as you can, it'll all look nice and neat on the inside. And then again, because this is a curved seam, we want the seam allowance to lay nice and flat underneath the seam. Just going to cut in a couple of notches around this curved seam, so There we go. So if you do that, it'll lay nice and flat underneath. So if you turn this all through, it'll look something like this. There you go. So you've got half the tab here in stretch mesh and half in your fabric. And it will look like this. So give this seam a little press. You can use a tailor's ham just to keep the curve of the seam, or you can use the end of your ironing board just by placing it around the end and then giving it a little bit of a press. So if you just place the curved bust seam over the edge of your ironing board and just give it a little bit of a press, it just helps retain the shape of the bust seam. So you're going to sew the back on in much the same way. Again, we're trapping the seam allowances in between the layers. So place your back main pattern piece to the right side of the side front. Flip this all over. And if you like, you can baste the two side front layers together, the main and line. That does make this a little bit easier. And then just place the right side of your lining to the right side of the lining on the inside of the bra, and then match all these layers at the side seam and pin in place. Again, just sew the seam with a 1 cm seam allowance and a straight stitch. Just grade your seam allowance. I'm cutting the two stretch mesh layers to the same length. They're both thin layers, so that doesn't matter. Then the first fabric layer I'm just cutting slightly longer. And then finally the last layer, cut that the longest of all the layers. So this is a straight seam, so you don't need to notch. Don't need to notch this seam allowance. And then if you just fold the pattern out so the back main and lining are wrong sides together, all the seams are hidden on the inside like that. And there we go, and just give that seam a little quick press as well. So that's half the bra complete. You just got to then repeat the process with the other side, front and back pattern pieces, just exactly the same but on the other side. So we have the makings of a bra right here. So in the next tutorial I'll be showing you how to apply your band elastic to the bottom edge, how to sew on all your fold over elastic, and also include a small tab here of strap elastic with a ring on so that we can apply, or so that we can attach our adjustable strap here later on. So in the next video I'll be showing you this on the style 1 version of this pattern. The overall silhouette is exactly the same, so applying all your elastics is exactly the same. So thank you very much for watching, and I really hope you enjoy this pattern as much as I do. This is one of my favourite styles that comes with the Darcey Bra sewing pattern. So I really hope you find this tutorial helpful, and I'll see you next time.